Once a week I go to eat at a hospital cafeteria, but my sister and parents say it's wrong. I work just a few blocks from the hospital and get there quickly by bike. They have a cozy cafeteria with reasonable prices, so I usually go there for lunch once a week. The food isn't anything amazing, but they sometimes have a decent selection. The staff already recognizes me and is always friendly. They don't mind that I come just to eat, and it's much quieter than any local restaurant. I'm autistic and don't like loud noises, so quiet lunches at this place are a lifesaver for me. Recently, my sister found out I eat at the hospital cafeteria and scolded me, saying those cafeterias are meant only for people who are there out of necessity. I argued that I bring them revenue, and I'm not taking food from patients. Plus, I only go once a week, so what's the problem? But she still insisted that what I'm doing is wrong. Then she got our parents involved and they took her side, saying I should only eat there if I have a real reason to be at the hospital. I told them they were being ridiculous. It's just food I pay for. Now, since none of us want to back down, I'm torn. I go to the hospital cafeteria once a week simply because it's near my work. So, before we move on to the update, feel free to share your opinion in the comments about the author's question. Personally, I don't think he's doing anything wrong. It's completely normal to eat at a hospital cafeteria. When I was at the maternity hospital with my wife after a partner birth, I also ate at the hospital cafeteria and didn't see anything wrong with it. I saw medical students there too, and they weren't patients, but they still ate there. Sure, the food isn't top tier, but it's cheap and, like the author said, good enough for a meal. So for me, everything's fine. What do you think? Now let's move on to the update. First update. The situation was just insane. I never imagined my sister could act like that. I'm 23 and recently asked for advice because my parents and sister were mad at me for eating at the hospital cafeteria near my job. I like the peace and quiet there on the days I go, but things escalated so fast, I still can't believe how far it went over something so minor. My sister acted petty and without any basis. When she found out I was eating at the hospital, she attacked me, yelling that the food was only for patients. We argued, and I told her I wasn't taking anything from anyone. Then, as usual, she complained to our parents, and they sided with her, as I expected, insisting that it's wrong to just go there for food. We had several fights in a row, and they kept pressuring me to stop going. So I made a post online, and everyone in the comments said I wasn't doing anything wrong. Turns out, it's pretty normal to eat at a hospital cafeteria just because you like it. I hoped things would calm down, but a few days later my sister called and asked if I'd stopped eating there. I said no, and it all started again. My parents called, furious, as if I was obligated to obey them just because they said so. I reminded them I don't live with them anymore, and that's exactly why I moved out. They always side with my sister. Of course they protested, but this time the fight didn't stay within the family. Other relatives found out because my sister tried to rally more people to her side. She was so determined to impose her will on me that she started seeking support from others, but the only ones who sided with her were our parents. When I told my uncle what had happened, he personally scolded them over the phone. He said they always take her side because she's their favorite, and that they're terrible parents for allowing such blatant favoritism. Later, my cousin went with me to the same cafeteria for lunch and said he also wanted to start eating there once a week. He works nearby and rides his bike too. We'd already run into each other there before, and he was pleasantly surprised by how much healthier the food was compared to other places. He's a bit picky about food, so the cafeteria became his new lunch spot. My sister got even angrier when she found out other family members were now eating there too. When everything came to light, my parents felt ashamed and backed off. They apologized to me and mumbled something about how they genuinely thought eating at a hospital cafeteria was weird and felt like they had to defend my sister. I told them they've been indulging her for so long that it's all they know how to do now. Whenever she fights with someone, they jump in to defend her. She treats me like a condescending, controlling school bully just because she's older, and they've been enabling her all this time. But I'm done putting up with it. My parents finally admitted they were wrong and apologized. Then they made my sister apologize to me too, and you could tell how much she hated it because she started out mumbling through her teeth. Later, my parents invited me over for dinner as a further apology, but it felt more like a performance for the rest of the family since they told everyone about it in advance. The dinner itself was great, I won't lie. They made turkey, one of my favorite dishes. I love the drumsticks with gravy. Yeah, I make a bit of a mess eating them, but I can't help it. My sister always used to find it funny, and that night was one of the rare moments I didn't mind her laughing at me, so I didn't think much of it when she giggled at dinner. Later, after the family dinner, I noticed my bike was missing. I had parked it in the backyard, out of sight from the living room window, and it had just vanished. I panicked because it's my only mode of transportation. My parents were a bit worried too, but my sister acted weirdly pleased, kept giggling, and looked smug. I immediately suspected her, but she played innocent, even saying, "I can't believe you think I'd do something like that." I already knew she could be petty, but this was a new level. I said I was going to check with a neighbor who had a security camera, and if needed, call the cops. My sister suddenly got nervous, and I got angry and told her I knew it was her and demanded she return the bike. She started crying and insisting she didn't do it, and my parents, of course, immediately took her side and scolded me for accusing her. I told them I'd had enough, walked out to ask the neighbor to check the camera footage, and said I'd call the police. That's when my sister gave in and called me, asking me to come back. The look on my parents' faces after they had just defended her was priceless. She confessed that she was still furious about being forced to apologize for something she believed she was right about, so she arranged for a couple of her friends to steal my bike during dinner. She said her friends had been waiting in a minivan just around the corner with the bike inside. Then she started begging me not to call the cops, saying I couldn't do that because I'm her older brother. My parents supported that logic too, but I pulled out my phone and headed for the door again. They ran after me, and my sister cried and pleaded for me to stop. I called her a spoiled brat. I told my parents I couldn't believe they were still defending her after everything she had done. That's when they finally reached their limit and told my sister to call her friends immediately and give my bike back. She was sobbing as she dialed, then suddenly ran to her room to talk to them in private. I couldn't hear anything, just whispering, and my parents looked really worried. My sister would never willingly admit she told someone to steal my bike. She just kept crying and repeating that it was just a joke. She also kept trying to downplay it by saying it was a cheap bike. Yeah, I bought it used for $50 a few months ago, but it's in great condition and my only mode of transportation. She kept glancing at our parents for support, but this time they couldn't cover for her. She just slumped into a chair, hugging her knees, and waited for her friends to show up. The longer it took for the bike to come back, the more panicked she became. She kept messaging them over and over, even though she'd said they were only a couple houses away. It took nearly an hour for them to return it. They finally pulled up in a minivan with my bike crammed into the back. It was soaking wet and caked in mud, like it had been dragged out of a ditch. They unloaded it as fast as they could and drove off. I say, stolen, because I'm still convinced my sister told them to get rid of it completely, and if I hadn't mentioned the neighbor's security cameras, I might never have gotten it back. When her friends finally arrived, their legs were covered in mud almost to the knees. They begged me not to call the police. I started recording with my phone and asked if it was true that my sister told him to get rid of my bike. I reminded them about the security camera, and they gave in and admitted yes. She wanted them to dump it in a pond a few kilometers away. They had to go back and fish it out once they realized they'd been caught. The bike had been nearly submerged in dirty water. Thankfully, I didn't have many accessories on it, just a detachable light and a water bottle. The bottle was gone. I wasn't even surprised to hear their confession. I made them repeat everything to my parents. My parents were furious and tore into my sister. She collapsed to the floor, sobbing and kicking like a toddler. I hadn't seen her act like that since she actually was a kid, and it disturbed me to realize she hadn't really grown up. After that, she locked herself in her room. Her friends were permanently banned from the house. My mom forced my sister to come out and apologize to me again. My dad, supervising her, made her clean and oil my bike from top to bottom while I worked on drying out the light. By the time she was done, it was dark outside. When she came back in, she looked at me like I was the devil, but my parents immediately shut it down and said they had never been so ashamed of her. She went back to her room crying, and I finally had a serious talk with my parents about how childish she is and how it's their fault. I told them I couldn't believe I was the one acting like the voice of reason in the family, but the fact she had a full-on tantrum on the floor showed she's still a child mentally because they coddled her for so long. They always made me the scapegoat whenever she did something wrong, and now she basically has no sense of responsibility. For the first time, they didn't argue with me. Later, my dad quietly drove me and my bike back to my apartment in his SUV. He even gave me some cash to replace the missing water bottle. My sister and her little crew used to mess with me constantly when we were younger. They'd gang up and make fun of me every chance they got, and I'd usually just ignore them, because I simply wasn't interested in them, and apparently that's what pissed them off the most. But after the bike incident, I started getting tons of messages from unknown numbers, trashing me for making my sister cry over a stupid joke. Knowing her, I'm sure she told everyone a completely different version of the story. I sent detailed responses explaining what really happened, and even mentioned that I had recordings where her friends admitted everything. Some students from her college found out what really happened, maybe from my messages, maybe her friends slipped up, but she got so ashamed that she came home in tears, freaking out. She said people were calling her and her friends bitches and bike thieves. I never went to college myself, but I know students who rely on bikes treat them with real care. Many are living paycheck to paycheck. My sister said someone even joked, "Don't leave your bike near her, or it'll disappear." She was so crushed she didn't leave her room for 3 days, throwing herself a pity party. Then our parents called me, trying to shift the blame onto me again. I reminded them of our recent talk. It's time to stop coddling her and let her deal with the consequences of her own actions. If she flunks college again, it's because she didn't put in the effort. I told them straight up they were just looking for someone to blame so she'd feel better, but I'm not the one who caused any of this. I won't let them make me the scapegoat anymore. She's an adult, so let her act like one. They sounded defeated, apologized, and ended the call. I think they genuinely hoped I'd just swallow it all and take the blame to make her feel better, but that's not happening anymore. Now they pretend nothing ever happened, and my sister and her little crew avoid me like the plague, which honestly suits me fine. I don't need more drama. But if anything like this happens again, I won't go easy on them. Second update. First off, the bike's fine. I managed to avoid rust after she had it thrown in a pond. It wasn't new anyway, and there were no new creaks or grinding sounds. I was worried something might be wrong, but it's just a basic single speed. After lubrication, it runs great. I even re-greased the bottom bracket bearings. A couple months ago, I replaced the rear tire and tube myself, and I still ride it almost everywhere. Now about my beloved sister. She barely passed her exams and tried multiple times to blame her bad grades on me and the depression after the bike incident. But even our parents stopped enabling her at some point. They reached their limit. They made her sit in her room and study every time she had a meltdown or complained about life. A few times they even threatened to cut off her internet and phone if she didn't do her homework. She cried and said she hated them, but eventually pulled herself together and did what they asked. She did manage to finish college, somehow, but graduation wasn't a happy moment. We all went to congratulate her, but she was still miserable because she didn't have any friends left. She'd hoped to celebrate with her old crowd, but they'd long ditched her because she's insufferable. As a punishment, our parents made her get around by bike, ironically. She hated bikes even more than the bus. It was a second-hand cruiser our dad bought her. Our parents basically begged me to take her on weekend bike rides, so she'd at least get out of the house. I agreed only because they asked politely and offered dinner. Last time we talked about it, she still insisted eating in the hospital cafeteria was wrong, but couldn't explain why. No matter how anyone asked her, no one took her side anymore. Even our parents admitted it wasn't that strange anymore, especially after they found out the cafeteria was actually a separate business and not part of the hospital. As a gesture to the family, they went there with me a couple of times for a family lunch and made my sister come along. She sat there twitchy and kept saying out loud that she couldn't believe they were forcing her to eat there even though it went against her beliefs. She said it in a tone like it violated her religion or something. They scolded her for it, and as usual, she started crying, but they told her, "Enough, it's time to grow up." I think she clings to her beliefs because letting go of them would mean admitting she was wrong, and she just can't do that. Sometimes it seemed to me that she wasn't just spoiled and controlling, but possibly narcissistic, though of course I can't diagnose anyone. In the end, her whole friend group turned their backs on her because dealing with her brought them a lot of trouble. At least 2 of them were directly involved in the plan to steal and dump my bike, and when the truth came out, they got seriously chewed out. So the whole group blamed my sister and cut ties with her to save their own reputations. Even though I didn't press charges, the 2 girls who took the bike got into big trouble with their families. Turned out the minivan they used was one of their parents, and after everything came out, they weren't allowed to use it anymore. Those parents even came to me personally to apologize for their daughter and asked for a copy of the video I had. I gave it to them. Even though they were all accomplices, they threw my sister under the bus and exposed her to everyone. I think she finally got a taste of what it's like to be the scapegoat. For a while, people even laughed at her because she had to ride a bike to college and back. Our parents decided it was cheaper than the bus, and no one was giving her rides anymore. She didn't have any friends left. No one stole or broke her bike, she just hated it. Our dad also made her learn how to repair and maintain it herself. He used to be into bikes when he was younger and still has all the tools. He knows enough to do all our bike maintenance, though he doesn't ride anymore. He even taught me basic repairs. For those wondering if my sister did something crazier or tried to get revenge on me, she didn't. She just got bitter. They sent her to therapy, and it seems like she's a tiny bit more reasonable now, but if there's going to be real change, it'll take years. At least she's no longer trying to boss me around. Since my last post, my parents have invited me over for dinner several times. At the table, my sister barely talks to me, and it seems to annoy her even more that I genuinely don't care. Even our parents have told her she destroyed her own reputation, but she still can't stop blaming me, because she always needs someone else to take the fall. Ever since that prank she pulled, I always lock my bike with a chain and lock whenever I'm at my parents' place, just in case. After she graduated college, our parents suddenly announced she was moving out. She said she didn't want to, but they made her get a job and find a place immediately. They told her her party days were over, and it was time to learn what adult life really is. Many relatives had told them she'd never grow up until she lived on her own and started paying her own bills. Our parents hesitated for a long time. She was obviously the golden child, but eventually they realized that if nothing changed, she'd never mature. My sister wasn't exactly thrilled. She was used to being a spoiled brat, but she couldn't blame me for it, since I had nothing to do with the decision, and she knew that. Although, in college, she threw a few tantrums like, "It was just a bike," whenever something went wrong, and tried to pin the blame on me again. One time, my mom just slapped her and told her to stop acting like I was responsible for all her grievances. She added that for me, it wasn't just a bike, but basically my means of survival, since it was my primary mode of transportation now. My sister now lives in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 other girls. She had to move far away so her reputation wouldn't follow her to her new job. My mom even cried when she moved out. Now my sister works in an office and is learning the basics of secretarial work, but she constantly complains about hating her current life while still trying to make jabs at me about how she'll live once she starts earning more. I just told her, "Live however you want," and she got mad that I wasn't reacting. She doesn't get along with her roommates and still rides the same bike that our father bought her. She doesn't want to spend money on the bus since the office is just a few kilometers away and walking takes too long. She wanted, even demanded, that our parents buy her a car after she was kicked out of the house, but they refused. After that, she didn't talk to them for a while. It's clear that our bike rides together ended when she moved out. While we still rode together on weekends, she would often try to make fun of me whenever she could. I don't even remember most of her jabs now because I just ignored them and didn't show irritation. She would call me dumb or special and roll her eyes. Among her constant childish pranks was one where she'd say, "My bike is better than yours, at least it has gears," but she could never manage to pass me. It seems like our rivalry even motivated her to get into better shape. She probably just really wants to make me look like the loser so that in comparison, she doesn't seem like the failure. My sister wants a car, but she can't afford it yet since she has trouble saving money. She asked our parents for an electric bike for Christmas, but they refused after seeing how much good models cost. They had already spent quite a bit on her college tuition. As a joke, I gave her new tires for her bike, which earned me a deathly glare. In 2024, our parents had to bail her out of several financial messes because she's terrible with money. Despite reality repeatedly slapping her in the face, she still acts like a spoiled brat in denial, but somehow manages to get by. Another thing she's angry at me for is that I live alone while she has to share an apartment with roommates. I've met her roommates, and to her dismay, they seem to like me, which probably makes her hate them even more since they don't obey her the way our parents did. She can't stand it when people don't do what she wants, so living with people who ignore her tantrums must be hell for her. And that's the story for now. Unfortunately, there have been no more updates from the author, so this is where it ends. Let me know what you think in the comments about all of this. How would you act in the brother's place with a girl like this? The author did a great job communicating everything to the parents because, personally, I probably wouldn't have been able to. Thanks for watching this video to the end. Check out our previous one right here, and good luck.